Seattle is the economic engine for the Puget Sound region, and if the city isn't doing well, that affects all of you neighboring communities as well. So the election this November is critical for the future of Seattle, and one of the most important races is the one for mayor. We have invited both candidates to join our show, and only one has accepted so far. That is former City Council member Bruce Harrell. He joins us now. Good morning, Bruce.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to get right to the number one issue for most voters, which is homelessness. Compassion Seattle, the voter initiative that qualified for the ballot, was struck down by a judge. An appeal of that ruling failed. We know that you were a supporter of that initiative. If you are elected, what would you do as mayor to make sure the elements of Compassion Seattle are part of your plans?
Well, thanks for the question. And again, thanks for having me on the show. Well, I did write a letter, a public letter, an open letter to the council as they look at their budget. And quite candidly, I want many of the components of that Compassionate Seattle to be placed in the budget. And through policy, through ordinance or resolution, a lot of its contents I will move forward with. An example will be I will publish a plan to make sure that we can restore some faith that we don't have now with the voters and with the residents, that we are heading in the right direction. We're making the right investments. We are moving people off of the sidewalks and out of our parks into housing, both supportive housing, transitional housing, but we're heading in the right direction. I will allocate at a minimum 12% of the budget, and we're already spending 11%. And so when the opponents of the charter said it was an unfunded mandate, I said we will find that money to do it. That's what a good mayor does. And so we will make the right investments, get people off the streets and into housing. And there are other components I could talk about if you like, but certainly the parameters of that plan are acceptable to me. And it fights the inaction. It does something based on the inaction that we're seeing now.
Now, you said you wrote this letter. Did you get any kind of response yet? Because you're going to inherit whatever is decided by the city council.
No, I didn't get a response, and of course that's okay. But I sort of put a stake in the ground, if you will, because I actually think, just based on many people who are advocating for action and for right investments, I'm going to anticipate that the city council and its budget deliberations will move towards some of its contents. I listened closely to anyone that opposed the Compassionate Seattle Charter Amendment, because I wanted to fully understand the opposition, because I am not going to put my name behind something that is bad policy. And quite honestly, I think many people were just repeating what they heard. Well, it was an unfunded mandate, or it was a dog whistle for unauthorized sweeps. And there was nothing in the language that had that. And so to some extent, the court's ruling, the judge said that the judge would have voted for the contents itself, but the judge also said that they thought the power of the city council was being usurped, and this was an inappropriate use of a charter amendment. So, okay, that's fine, the constitutionality of it, but the contents are what's most important to me, and the contents, I think, will help the homeless and help residents in the city.
Do you know where you would put the housing for the homeless, the emergency housing? Or I know there's been talk of 2,000 units, and where that would go and how much it would cost to maintain?
Sure, and thanks for the question. So when I was on the council, we looked at the siting criteria, and it was good criteria, it was valid. And so we looked through for access to transit, access to social services, places that could withstand transitional housing, as an example, for 1 year. And so to answer your question directly, we have available sites, but I will continue to aggressively work and negotiate with neighborhoods inside the city and outside of the city for available sites. There is not a shortage of land or sites. And I said repeatedly since I announced my candidacy, and I think that's why I ended number one out of 15 candidates in the primary, is that we have the available sites. We just have to go through once again, that we should have been doing that during the height of COVID, because that's what you do when we are stuck in a situation. You continue to do the work that can be done. So we have the siting criteria, so we have to choose those sites inside and outside the city. We have the funding. We have the available resources. For goodness sake, we received $116 million of federal funds that we did not even anticipate. There continues, I'll give you a specific example. a tiny house, a tiny home, which is, we know it's just a temporary fix for perhaps 6 months to a year, that only costs about $4,000 to build. So we can do the 2,000, again, Compassion Seattle required 2,000 units to be built, 2,000 homes, small, tiny homes to be built the first year. We can do that. And if we say there's less than 5,000 people on the streets now for, $20 million, and we know the city's spending over north of $200 million as we speak, we can find both the sites and build the construction to at least get people out of tents and in a housing that has heat and electricity and facilities where they can clean themselves. And most importantly, access to services, whether it's, drug and alcohol treatment or mental illness treatment, et cetera. We know that, under my approach, we're not criminalizing poverty by any stretch. And so it's not a dog whistle to start locking people up. It's quite the opposite. And so we will find the sites. There continues to be available sites, and that's the job of the mayor and the city council.
Bruce, we're going to try to go a little bit extra here, so I'm going to try to get you to limit your answers to 1 minute each. This is a question from one of our listeners. Please ask Bruce Harrell why he voted yes on the head tax when he was part of the council.
Sure. So let's clear the record that I will support any sustainable revenue. That the original tax I voted against, it was 5-4. And then our Mayor Durkin, negotiated a deal that she thought was acceptable to small businesses, large businesses, and to the city. That then passed 7-2. So my original vote was against the head tax. I supported a negotiated deal, and then I repealed the tax when it looked like the majority of council members, including myself, 7-2, were going to repeal the tax. So I have to make it clear that, I am a person that believes in job creation and environment by which businesses can thrive. That's why people come to Seattle. And so there's been a mischaracterization of both my leadership or the position on the head tax. The original vote was 5-4, and I was on the losing side of that tax. My opponent was on the winning side of that tax, which was what $500 per head is one example of the components of that tax.
One final question from me, Bruce. What exactly, outside of the few issues we've talked about here, what does separate you from your opponent?
I'm going to let the voters decide that. I think there are clear and distinct approaches to almost all of the major issues. I never subscribed to the defund police narrative. She made a firm commitment to defund the police. I try to support and evaluate leaders in all departments, such as the chief of police, how they handled Chief Carmen Best as a leader of the department, resulting in her resignation, a forced resignation of some sort. That is not my style of leadership. Again, my approach to homelessness is that I do not like inaction, and I don't make excuses. And I think from City Hall right now, you're just seeing finger pointing. That is not how I've been successful in my life. I will take ownership of the issue. The buck stops with me. I will prove to this city that we have the resources to solve this issue. We just don't have the political will. So I think people will see distinctions. I don't spend a lot of time denigrating any human being. That's not my job or style. So, but I think people will see noticeable differences as this race unfolds.
For sure. Thank you, Bruce Harrell, candidate for Seattle mayor. You have a chance to vote for him in November. We got to tell people, too, Bruce, they've got to vote. We've got to have a bigger turnout this time. It is a critical race. We thank you for your time.
And there was a 42% vote in the primary, so that's actually one of the highest voter turnouts.
Yes, we can do even better. Let's do better.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so much.